Picture this, red wine cascading down your white dress, 400 people staring, your mother-in-law calling you nothing in front of everyone, and you're standing there 20 weeks pregnant, bleeding, knowing that in 72 hours you're about to sign the papers to buy her entire $800 million company. This is Sarah Mitchell's story, a woman so powerful she runs a billion-dollar tech empire in secret, so careful she never let anyone know her worth, not even the man she fell in love with. But her mother-in-law thought she was just a gold digger, a nobody trying to trap her rich son. So she spent 6 months systematically destroying Sarah, culminating in the most humiliating moment of her life. What Patricia Blackwell didn't know, the woman she was pouring wine on owned everything. The question is, when you have all the power in the world, do you choose revenge or redemption? Stay with me through this 90-minute journey about secrets, power, and the moment when hiding who you are becomes more dangerous than revealing the truth. And if this story grips you the way it gripped me, show some love with a like, drop a comment telling me what you'd do in Sarah's position, and subscribe so you never miss stories about women who refuse to stay small. Now let's begin where Sarah's carefully constructed world started to crumble. The wine bottle came down over my head like Judgment Day, and I felt the cold liquid cascade over my face, my hair, soaking into my white dress as 400 people gasped in perfect unison. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the shocked silence. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. Get out of my house." And she had absolutely no idea that I was about to sign the papers to acquire her entire $800 million company in 72 hours. She didn't know I was a CEO. She didn't know I was a billionaire. And she definitely didn't know I was carrying her grandchild. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't about what she didn't know. It's about what I didn't know, about trust, about love, and about the moment when keeping secrets stops protecting you and starts destroying everything you care about. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how the girl who had nothing became the woman who owned everything and almost lost what mattered most. I woke up at 5:30 that morning, 6 months before the engagement party that would change everything. The nausea hit me before my eyes were fully open, and I stumbled to the bathroom of my modest apartment in South Boston. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. 28 years old, dark circles under my eyes, wearing an old college t-shirt with holes in it. I reached for what I thought were multivitamins and swallowed 2 pills with tap water. I had no idea they were prenatal vitamins my doctor had prescribed the month before, just in case. I had no idea about a lot of things back then. My alarm went off again, and I pulled on jeans and a simple sweater. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make anyone look twice at me on the street. I grabbed my keys and headed down to the parking lot where my 2015 Honda Civic waited. The car had 180,000 miles on it and a dent in the passenger door I'd never bothered to fix. I could have afforded a fleet of Maseratis. I could have lived in a penthouse overlooking the harbor. But nobody knew that except 2 people in the entire world, and I intended to keep it that way. The drive to the nonprofit tech training center took 30 minutes through morning traffic. I parked in the back lot and walked through the front door at 7:45, right on time. The kids were already starting to arrive, backpacks slung over their shoulders, hoping to learn skills that might change their lives. "Morning, Miss Sarah," called out Tommy, a 16-year-old who reminded me so much of myself at that age, it hurt to look at him sometimes. "Morning, Tommy. You ready for the Python module today?" "Born ready," he said, grinning. I taught coding to underprivileged kids from 8 in the morning until noon, 4 days a week. This was real. This was the one completely authentic part of my life. These kids didn't know I had money. They just knew I showed up and cared about them. At noon, I told everyone I had to head to my other job. They thought I worked at a coffee shop in the afternoons. I let them think that. Instead, I drove to a parking garage in downtown Boston, pulled into my reserved spot on the executive level, and changed clothes in my car. Off came the jeans and sweater. On went the tailored business suit, the heels, the minimal but expensive jewelry. I pulled my hair back into a sleek bun and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. This was the other Sarah, the one almost nobody knew existed. I took the private elevator to the penthouse suite and walked through glass doors etched with the words Sterling Tech Solutions. My assistant looked up and smiled. Good afternoon, Miss Sterling. You have a board meeting at 2, and Marcus wants to see you before that. Thanks, Jennifer. Send him in. I walked into my corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. My desk was glass and steel, minimalist and modern. On the credenza sat the only personal item I allowed myself at work, a photo of my mother taken when she was 25, laughing at something off camera. She looked so young, so full of hope. She died when I was 17, and I'd been running ever since. Marcus Reed knocked and entered without waiting for permission. He was the only person besides my accountant who knew about my double life, and he'd earned that trust over 6 years of working together. He was 42, had been a tech CFO for 20 years, and had taken a chance on me when I was just a kid with an algorithm and a dream. We need to talk about the Blackwell opportunity, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I'm listening. He slid a folder across the glass surface. Blackwell Industries, $800 million manufacturing empire. Family-owned for 3 generations. They're in trouble. I opened the folder and started reading. Debt load of $120 million. Hemorrhaging $8 million per quarter. The numbers painted a clear picture. Without a major capital injection, Blackwell Industries would be bankrupt within 18 months. Why are they hiding it? I asked, noting the discrepancies between public filings and the real books. That's the interesting part. Patricia Blackwell, the SO, has been cooking the books to hide the losses from the board. We think she's embezzled around $25 million into offshore accounts. I looked up sharply. Patricia Blackwell, you know her? I knew her. God help me, I knew her. She was about to become my mother-in-law. I met Evan Blackwell 6 months earlier at the food bank where I volunteered every Saturday morning. It was another piece of my real life, the parts that had nothing to do with money or power or the empire I'd built. He was teaching a group of kids to code covered in marker ink from the whiteboard, genuinely laughing at something one of them had said. Our eyes met over a crashed computer, and he smiled. You any good with tech? He asked. I walked over, looked at the screen for about 10 seconds, and fixed the issue. Then I had to stop myself from doing it too expertly, from revealing that I could code circles around most engineers in the city. I know a little bit, I said. That was impressive. He extended his hand. I'm Evan. Sarah. His handshake was warm and firm. He had kind eyes, the kind that actually saw you instead of looking through you. I hadn't realized how rare that was until I met him. We started talking, really talking, and I felt something crack open in my chest. For the first time since my mother died 11 years earlier, I felt safe with someone. These kids don't need charity, Evan said as we watched them work. They need someone who sees their potential. I knew exactly what he meant. I'd been one of those kids once, sleeping in my car in parking lots, studying under streetlights because I couldn't afford electricity. Potential meant nothing if nobody gave you a chance to use it. Coffee dates at cheap diners followed, where I insisted on splitting the check. Long walks through the public garden, talking about everything except money. He told me about his students like they were his own children, and I fell in love with the way he cared about people who society had written off. After 3 dates, I had Marcus run a background check. I had to know if Evan was after something. What I discovered shocked me. Evan Blackwell, son of Patricia Blackwell, heir to an $800 million manufacturing fortune. He'd left the family business 8 years ago to become a high school history teacher. He lived on his teacher's salary of $52,000 a year and volunteered as a firefighter on weekends. He'd been estranged from his mother for years over arguments about wasting his potential. The relief I felt was intoxicating. He wasn't after money. He had money and had rejected it. He chose purpose over privilege. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 people from wealthy backgrounds, both pretending to be working class, both running from our family's expectations, both keeping massive secrets. I thought maybe I could tell him eventually, after we were married, when I knew it was real and permanent and safe. I was wrong about so many things. 4 months into our relationship, Evan finally took me to meet his family. I wore a nice dress from Macy's that cost $180 and felt expensive to my working-class sensibilities. When we pulled up to the Blackwell estate, a 12,000-square-foot mansion with a circular driveway and an actual fountain, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a house. This was a museum. Patricia Blackwell met us at the door. She was 58, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that assessed me like I was a balance sheet that didn't add up. I extended my hand. Mrs. Blackwell, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. She looked at my hand but didn't shake it. Patricia, Mrs. Blackwell was my mother-in-law. Her smile was ice cold. Where did you say you went to school? State University, full academic scholarship. How industrious. The way she said it made industrious sound like a disease. And your family? My mother passed when I was 17. I don't have other family. Something flashed in Patricia's eyes. Triumph, maybe. I see. How unfortunate. The dinner was worse. She seated me at the opposite end of the long table from Evan and served lobster tail, even though Evan had told her 3 times that I was allergic to shellfish. I quietly ate the side dishes and said nothing. You're not eating the lobster, Patricia announced loudly. Don't you like it? It's $80 per pound. I'm actually allergic to shellfish. Are you? Evan never mentioned that. Mom, I told you last week when Evan started. Well, I have so many things to remember. I can't keep track of every little detail. I met Evan's siblings that night. James, the older brother at 32, polite but distant. Morgan, the younger sister at 26, fake sweet to my face and whispering to Patricia when I used the wrong fork. I noticed Morgan's hands shook slightly when she reached for her water glass, but I didn't understand what it meant. As we left, I overheard Patricia pull Evan aside. She's not right for you. You can see that, can't you? Mom, I love her. Love. You love Madison too. Remember how that ended? Sarah is nothing like Madison. They're all the same, darling, all of them. In the car, Evan asked how bad it was. I lied and said it was fine, that she was just protective, that I understood. That was the first lie, the one that started the avalanche. I thought I could handle Patricia Blackwell. I thought I could win her over with time and patience and proof that I wasn't after Evan's money. I had no idea what I was up against. 3 months later, Evan proposed at the food bank where we met, getting down on one knee in front of all the kids we taught together. The ring was simple and beautiful and had clearly cost him 3 months of his teacher's salary. I knew I could buy him a $500,000 ring, but I didn't care. This one was perfect because it was real. I said yes through tears of joy, and I meant it with every cell in my body. 2 days after the proposal, Marcus dropped that folder on my desk about Blackwell Industries, and suddenly I had a decision to make. I could save Evan's family legacy. I could acquire the company, prevent the bankruptcy, save 2,000 jobs. And I could do it all without anyone knowing it was me until after the acquisition closed. It would be a gift, a surprise. Proof that I loved Evan for who he was, not what his family had. We're moving forward with the acquisition, I told Marcus. Sarah, you'll have to reveal your identity to Evan eventually. I know, I will. After the engagement party, I'll tell him everything and surprise him with the fact that I saved his family's company. He'll understand why I waited. And if he doesn't, he will. He loves me. This is a gift. Marcus looked at me with concern. Sarah, you're playing a dangerous game. I've been playing dangerous games my whole life. I'm still here. What I didn't know was that I was 4 weeks pregnant. The nausea I'd been dismissing as stress was actually morning sickness. The prenatal vitamins I thought were regular multivitamins were working exactly as prescribed. And the secrets I was keeping were about to destroy everything I'd built. The doctor's office was supposed to be routine. Just a physical before the wedding, standard procedure, nothing to worry about. I sat on the examination table in a paper gown, checking emails on my phone while waiting for Dr. Williams to review my blood work. When she walked in, she was smiling. Congratulations, Sarah. You're about 4 weeks pregnant. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. I'm what? Pregnant. That's why I prescribed those prenatal vitamins last month during your annual checkup. I suspected based on your cycle information. Those vitamins you've been taking, those are prenatal. I stared at her, my brain refusing to process the words. Pregnant, 4 weeks. That meant conception happened right around the time Evan proposed. Are you sure? Dr. Williams pulled up the lab results on her tablet. Your HCG levels are definitely positive. Based on your last menstrual period, I'd estimate you're about 4 weeks along. We'll do an ultrasound at 8 weeks to confirm dating and check for a heartbeat. I drove home in a daze and sat in my car outside my apartment for over an hour. My hands rested on my flat stomach, and I tried to imagine a baby growing inside me. Evan's baby. Our baby. Finally, I called Marcus. I'm pregnant. Silence on the other end. Then, does Evan know? No, and he can't. Not yet. Not until after the party. Sarah, this is getting too complicated. Too many secrets. 8 weeks, I said, my voice shaking. I just need 8 more weeks. The engagement party is in 8 weeks. Then I'll tell him everything. The company, the acquisition, the baby, all of it. It'll be perfect. Nothing about this situation is perfect. He was right, but I couldn't see it then. I was convinced I could control the timing, control the narrative, control everything. That's what I'd done my whole life. Control everything or lose everything. There was no middle ground. I went to bed that night thinking about my mother. She died of a heart attack in our kitchen at 48 years old, collapsing before her night shift at the hospital where she worked as a janitor. It was her third job. She'd been working herself to death to keep us housed and fed, and her heart just gave out. Her last words to me in the emergency room were, "Baby, don't ever let anyone know what you're worth. They'll only try to take it from you." I was 17 and I took those words as gospel. Within 8 months, I was homeless, sleeping in my car, studying computer science at the public library during the day, and working night shifts at a convenience store to buy food. I taught myself to code by watching free online tutorials and practicing on library computers. At 19, I created an algorithm that could predict corporate merger success rates with 93% accuracy. At 22, I sold my first patent for $8 million and cried in the lawyer's office because I couldn't believe someone was handing me a check with that many zeros. At 24, I incorporated Sterling Tech Solutions using my mother's maiden name. I hired a male actor to serve as the public face of the company and operated through layers of lawyers and shell corporations. I never appeared in photos or gave interviews. I was a ghost running a billion-dollar empire. By 28, Sterling Tech was valued at $1.2 billion. I lived in an $1,800 a month apartment and drove a car with a dented door. I had no friends except Marcus and Rachel, a detective I'd met volunteering at a women's shelter. And I hadn't dated anyone in 3 years before Evan because I was terrified that anyone who got close to me would only want my money. When Evan proposed, I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me for me. Someone who couldn't be after my wealth because he didn't know it existed. Someone who'd chosen a teacher's salary over his family's millions, proving he valued purpose over profit. I thought I'd found safety. I didn't realize I was building a trap. The first month of pregnancy passed in a blur of morning sickness and escalating tension with Patricia. She'd started a campaign to systematically exclude me from family events. Week 1, I accidentally wasn't invited to James's birthday dinner. Patricia claimed she'd sent me an invitation and maybe it went to spam. I told Evan it was fine, that I had work anyway. Another lie. Week 2, the family had professional photos taken for holiday cards. I showed up at the photographer's studio, excited to be included, only to have Patricia tell me, "Oh, we only do blood family for these." You understand. I watched from the hallway as they posed together, Evan's face conflicted, but silent. He didn't speak up. He didn't insist I be included. And I told myself it was fine, that I was being too sensitive, that this was just how old money families worked. Week 3 was the country club incident that should have been my wake-up call. Patricia called and invited me to lunch, just the two of us, to get to know each other better. I was thrilled. Finally a breakthrough. Finally a chance to prove I wasn't the gold digger she thought I was. I showed up to find 30 society women in a private dining room. Patricia was giving a presentation about Evan's romantic history, complete with projected photos. This is Madison Bradford, Evan's college girlfriend, Harvard-educated from the Bradford family, now married to a senator. Click to the next photo. This is Anna Pemberton, his high school sweetheart, Princeton graduate currently working at the United Nations. Click to a photo of me pulled from my fake nonprofit LinkedIn profile. And this is Sarah Mitchell, State School, no family, works at a community center teaching underprivileged children. The way she said underprivileged children made it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. The women's polite, pitying smiles burned into my memory. I excused myself, drove to a parking lot 3 blocks away, and sat in my car for 45 minutes. The first trimester nausea was hitting hard, and I couldn't tell anymore if I was sick from the pregnancy or from the constant humiliation. When Rachel called and heard something wrong in my voice, I told her I was fine. Sarah, you don't have to handle everything alone. Yes, I do. That's how you survive. But I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was 8 weeks pregnant, running a $1 billion company, planning an $800 million acquisition, and trying to convince my future mother-in-law that I wasn't trying to destroy her son. And I was doing it all alone because I'd convinced myself that asking for help was the same as admitting weakness. At my 8-week ultrasound, I saw the heartbeat for the first time. It was just a flicker on the screen, a tiny pulse of light, but it made everything real in a way nothing else had. Do you want to hear it? Dr. Williams asked. I nodded, unable to speak. The sound filled the room, fast and strong and perfect. I started crying and couldn't stop. This was Evan's baby, our baby, a piece of both of us growing inside me, depending on me to keep it safe. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Williams said. Due date is May 15th. I did the math in my head. The engagement party was in 6 weeks. I'd be 12 weeks pregnant by then, just barely out of the first trimester. I could still hide it with the right dress. Nobody had to know until I was ready to tell them. Meanwhile, the acquisition talks were accelerating. Blackwell Industries was hemorrhaging money faster than Patricia's fraudulent accounting could hide. The board was getting desperate. They'd put out quiet fillers for potential buyers, and Sterling Tech had submitted an offer through a shell corporation. Marcus called me with updates every few days. The board is ready to accept our $800 million offer. They don't know we're the buyer yet. Everything's going through lawyers and intermediaries. Perfect. What's the timeline? Deal closes April 15th, assuming due diligence goes smoothly. That's 1 week after your engagement party. My plan was still intact. Tell Evan everything at the party or right after. Surprise him with the news that I'd saved his family's company. Announce the pregnancy. Start our marriage with a clean slate. No more secrets. It was going to be perfect. What I didn't know was that Patricia had hired a private investigator to follow me. For an entire week, he documented my movements. Going to the nonprofit in the morning, normal. Changing clothes in a parking garage, suspicious. Entering an executive building downtown, very suspicious. He couldn't get past building security to confirm which company I was entering. But he took photos of me in business suits, carrying briefcases, looking nothing like the modest community center teacher Patricia thought I was. His report landed on Patricia's desk with a clear conclusion. Subject is hiding something significant. Regular meetings with corporate lawyers, encrypted email accounts, possible involvement in fraud or con operation. Patricia read the report with grim satisfaction. She'd known there was something wrong with me from the start. Now she had proof. She just didn't know what she was actually looking at. 6 weeks before the engagement party, Patricia called a family dinner to discuss wedding plans. I arrived hopeful, my morning sickness barely under control, thinking maybe we'd finally found common ground. Instead, I walked into an ambush. The entire Blackwell family was there. Evan, James, Morgan, plus the family lawyer and accountant. They were all seated around the dining room table with serious expressions. Patricia got straight to the point. Sarah, we need to discuss the prenuptial agreement. Oh, I assumed we'd need one. That's completely reasonable. She slid a 60-page document across the table. Our lawyer has prepared everything, very standard for families of our standing. I started reading, no access to Blackwell assets, no claim on the company, no inheritance rights, an annual allowance of $50,000 if the marriage lasted, but only at Patricia's discretion. It was designed to humiliate me, to make me feel like property being acquired with conditions. But I thought about the $1 billion in my personal accounts and almost laughed. If only they knew. Then I got to page 47 and stopped laughing. There's also the matter of fidelity clauses and genetic verification, Patricia said, watching my face. I'm sorry, what? Paternity testing for any children to ensure Blackwell bloodline purity. Evan finally spoke up. Mom, that's insane. Sarah would never cheat on me. It's just a precaution, unless she has something to hide. I stood up very calmly, keeping my hand away from my stomach where a 12-week-old baby was growing. I'll have my lawyer review these documents. Patricia's eyebrows rose. You have a lawyer? The condescension in her voice was thick enough to cut. Of course, she assumed I couldn't afford legal representation. Of course, she thought I was some helpless girl who'd sign anything put in front of her. I may not come from money, Mrs. Blackwell, but I'm not stupid. I walked out with my head high and made it to my car before the shaking started. Evan followed me to the parking lot. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to do that. Sign it. I'll sign whatever she wants. You don't have to. We can get married without their blessing. Evan, I love you, not your money. Sign the prenup. Make it even stricter if you want. I don't care about your family's wealth. He pulled me into his arms. This is why I love you. You're nothing like what she thinks you are. If only he knew everything I was hiding. If only I trusted him enough to tell him the truth right then, in that parking lot, before everything spiraled out of control. But I didn't. I kissed him goodbye and drove home, convincing myself I just needed to wait a few more weeks, just until after the party. Then everything would be revealed, and it would all make sense. I had no idea that Patricia was already planning my destruction. Patricia's campaign escalated over the next month. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one small enough to seem petty if I complained, but together they formed a pattern of deliberate cruelty. She'd call Evan for lunch and specifically tell him not to bring me. When I found out, she'd act surprised. Oh, I thought he'd want alone time with his mother. I didn't mean to exclude Sarah. She'd plan family game nights and forget to tell me the time. I'd show up an hour late to find them already playing, and she'd greet me with, well, better late than never, I suppose. She'd buy expensive gifts for Morgan and James in front of me, then hand me a gift card to Target. I wasn't sure what you'd like, she'd say sweetly. This way you can pick something practical. The word practical was her favorite weapon. Everything about me was practical. My clothes were practical. My car was practical. My career teaching underprivileged kids was practical, but not ambitious. I was a practical choice for a man who'd given up on ambition. What she didn't know was that I was working 18-hour days between the nonprofit, running Sterling Tech, and managing the Blackwell acquisition. I was exhausted all the time, my first trimester symptoms making everything harder. I couldn't drink coffee because of the baby, so I was running on sheer willpower and the knowledge that this would all be worth it in the end. At 10 weeks pregnant, I started showing slightly. Just a small bump that I could hide with loose shirts, but it was there. Every morning I'd stand in front of the mirror and place my hand over where my baby was growing, and I'd promise that I was doing this for them, for our family, for the life we'd build together once all the secrets were finally revealed. The spa incident happened when I was 11 weeks pregnant. Patricia invited me and Morgan for a bonding day at an exclusive spa in Brookline. I was surprised by the invitation, but hopeful. Maybe she was finally accepting me. We met at the spa at 10 in the morning. It was all marble and soft lighting, with new age music playing and the scent of eucalyptus in the air. Patricia ordered champagne for the three of us while we waited for our massages. I'm not drinking right now, I said carefully. Patricia's eyes sharpened. No, watching your figure. Or is there something else? My heart stopped. Did she know? Could she somehow know? Just healthy living, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Patricia stared at me for a long moment, then turned to Morgan. Darling, come and look at this treatment menu. I think you'd love the hot stone massage. I stood to join them, still holding my glass of sparkling water. Morgan started to walk toward her mother, then suddenly stumbled. She crashed into me hard, and I fell sideways. My abdomen hit the corner of a marble bench, and immediate sharp pain radiated through my core. I gasped and clutched my stomach. Morgan was apologizing profusely, but I could barely hear her over the ringing in my ears. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever felt. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Are you okay? I just tripped. I don't know what happened. Patricia was there, all concern. "Oh dear, are you hurt? Should we call someone?" I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. I pulled down my pants with shaking hands and saw what I'd been terrified to see. Spotting. Not a lot, but enough to send panic coursing through my veins. No, 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 no. Please, not my baby, please. I called Rachel, not Evan, because I couldn't tell Evan without explaining why I was already 11 weeks pregnant and hadn't mentioned it. "I need you to come get me. Something's wrong." Rachel didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, she pulled up outside the spa and drove me straight to the emergency room at Massachusetts General Hospital. The wait at the ER was the longest 3 hours of my life. I sat in a bed behind a curtain, alone, trying not to think about what might be happening inside my body. Trying not to imagine losing this baby before Evan even knew it existed. Rachel sat with me, holding my hand. "Do you want me to call Evan?" "I can't. I'd have to explain everything." "Sarah, he's going to be the father of this child, assuming everything's okay. He deserves to know." I know. I know he does. After the party. I'll tell him after the party." Even then, bleeding and terrified, I was still trying to control the narrative. Still trying to manage the reveal. Still convinced I could orchestrate the perfect moment when everything came together. Finally, Dr. Williams arrived. She'd rushed over from her office when she heard I was in the ER. She did an ultrasound right there, portable machine wheeled to my bedside, and we all held our breath. The seconds stretched into eternity. Then I heard it, the heartbeat, fast and strong, unchanged from my last appointment. "The baby's okay," Dr. Williams said, and I started sobbing with relief. "But Sarah, you're now classified as high risk. The fall caused some bleeding from the placenta. Nothing catastrophic, but you need to be very careful." "I can be careful. I can do whatever you need me to do. I need you to reduce your stress levels dramatically. Your blood pressure is concerning, and your cortisol levels suggest you're under enormous pressure. What's going on?" I didn't know how to explain that I was running 2 lives, planning an $800 million acquisition, and being systematically destroyed by my future mother-in-law, who didn't know I could buy her company 10 times over. "I'm getting married in 5 weeks. His mother hates me. I'm trying to prove I'm good enough." Dr. Williams looked at me with compassion and firmness. "Sarah, none of that matters if you lose this baby. You need to choose." I chose. Sitting in that hospital bed, hand on my stomach, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being patient, done being understanding, done letting Patricia Blackwell treat me like I was nothing. Morgan had pushed me deliberately. I knew it in my bones. She'd probably been ordered to do it by Patricia. They were trying to make me miscarry, trying to eliminate the complication of a grandchild before it could further cement my place in the family. I called Marcus from the hospital parking lot while Rachel drove me home. "Change of plans. I'm not waiting until after the party." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to expose her. Everything. At the engagement party. I want the full presentation ready. Patricia's embezzlement, the fraud, all of it." "Sarah, you need to think about this. You're upset right now and you're pregnant. Don't make decisions when you're emotional." I'm thinking perfectly clearly, for the first time in months. "She tried to hurt my baby, Marcus. She's not going to get away with it." Looking back, I can see that I wasn't thinking clearly at all. I was hurt and angry and terrified, and I was about to make decisions that would nearly destroy everything I cared about. But in that moment, I felt powerful. I felt like I was finally taking control instead of being controlled. I had no idea how wrong I was. What I didn't see was Evan standing outside my hospital room. He'd followed me from work after Rachel called his phone by accident while trying to reach mine. He'd heard enough through the door to piece together the truth. I was pregnant. I'd been hiding it. I was in danger. And his mother had something to do with it. Patricia found him in the hallway and pulled him away before he could come into my room. "I told you she was hiding something," she said. "The pregnancy is probably not even yours. This is exactly what happened to your father." Evan looked back at my hospital room door, his face torn. "Don't, just don't. Come home, we'll talk about this properly." He left without coming in to see me, not because he was abandoning me, but because he was overwhelmed and manipulated and didn't know what to believe anymore. I didn't find out about this until much later, but it explained everything that happened next. 3 weeks before the party, I was 17 weeks pregnant with a small bump that I could hide under flowing tops. I'd stopped going to the nonprofit center as often, focusing all my energy on two things: the acquisition and planning my grand reveal. I worked with Marcus to create a presentation that would blow everyone's minds. First, I'd reveal my identity as CEO of Sterling Tech Solutions. Then I'd announce the acquisition of Blackwell Industries, saving the company and 2,000 jobs. Then I'd expose Patricia's embezzlement with full documentation. Finally, I'd announce my pregnancy as a triumphant conclusion. It would be perfect, devastating to Patricia, but heroic to everyone else. I'd prove that I wasn't a gold digger, that I was actually the one with all the power, and that I'd chosen to use that power to save Evan's family rather than destroy them. "What if Evan's angry you lied for so long?" Marcus asked during one of our planning sessions. "He'll understand. Once he sees I did it all for him, he'll understand." Marcus looked doubtful but didn't push. He'd learned over the years that when I made up my mind about something, I was immovable. The week before the party, Patricia called me for lunch. Just the two of us, to clear the air. I was suspicious but went anyway, holding on to a sliver of hope that maybe she'd had a change of heart. We met at her country club, where everyone knew her name and treated her like royalty. She ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, then smiled across the table. "I've been too hard on you. Evan clearly loves you. I should accept that and move forward." I wanted to believe her so badly. "Thank you. That means everything to me." "I know you're pregnant." The water glass I'd been holding nearly slipped from my hand. "What?" "I saw the prenatal vitamins in your purse at the spa before Morgan's unfortunate accident." The way she said unfortunate made it clear it had been anything but accidental. "I was going to tell Evan. I was waiting for the right time." "It's fine. Babies are wonderful. But Sarah, I need to know. Is it Evan's?" The question hit me like a slap. "Of course it's Evan's. How could you even ask that?" "Because you've been lying about something. I know you have. The encrypted emails, the lawyer meetings, the corporate espionage. I know you're working for whoever's trying to buy our company." Corporate espionage. She thought I was a spy, working for a competitor, feeding them inside information. It would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. "That's insane. I'm not involved in any corporate espionage." Technically true. I wasn't spying for the buyer. I was the buyer. "Prove me wrong. Tell me the truth about what you're hiding." This was my chance. I could have told her everything right there in that country club dining room and maybe saved us all a lot of pain. Instead, I said, "There's nothing to tell." Patricia leaned forward. "Then here's what's going to happen. At the engagement party, I'm announcing your pregnancy. My terms, my timing. The family deserves to know they'll have an heir. Evan and I will announce it when we're ready. I'm giving you a choice, Sarah. Confess what you're hiding now, or I'll expose you at the party." I stood up and grabbed my purse. There's nothing to expose. I walked out thinking I'd called her bluff, thinking I'd won that round. I was so wrong. The final week before the party, I rehearsed my presentation obsessively. I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror, timing every word, perfecting every reveal. I imagined the gasps, the shock, the moment when everyone realized I wasn't the gold digger Patricia had painted me as. At 20 weeks pregnant, exactly halfway through, I stood in front of my mirror wearing my engagement party dress. It was cream-colored, flowing, elegant. It hid my small bump perfectly. I looked beautiful, powerful, ready. Unaware she owned the company finalizing her $800 million deal, I said to my reflection. My mother-in-law spent 6 months trying to destroy me. I fell asleep that night, confident that I was about to win everything. I didn't know that Patricia was planning something entirely different. The wine was already chilling. The humiliation was already designed. And I was about to learn the hardest lesson of my life. The day of the party dawned sunny and perfect, the kind of spring day that makes you believe in fresh starts and happy endings. I spent the morning at a salon getting my hair and makeup done, feeling nervous but excited. By evening, everything would be out in the open. No more secrets, no more lies, just the truth in a future I'd built with my own hands. Evan picked me up at 6 o'clock, looking handsome in a dark suit. He'd been quiet all week, distracted, but I assumed he was stressed about the party. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Thank you. Are you okay? You seem distant." "Just nervous about tonight. My whole family, all together. You know how they can be." I squeezed his hand, my engagement ring catching the light. "It's going to be fine. Better than fine." We drove to the Blackwell estate in comfortable silence. As we pulled through the gates, I saw the massive white tent set up in the garden, glowing with what must have been 1,000 tiny lights. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive sedans and sports cars that represented half the money in Boston. 400 guests. Patricia had invited 400 people to celebrate our engagement, turning what should have been an intimate family gathering into a social spectacle. As we walked toward the entrance, I suddenly realized something was wrong. Every woman I saw was wearing a floor-length ball gown, dripping with diamonds, dressed for a formal gala. The men were in tuxedos, not suits. I looked down at my cream cocktail dress. It was beautiful, appropriate for a garden party, but it looked simple and cheap compared to the designer gowns surrounding me. Patricia appeared in the doorway, resplendent in navy blue Chanel. Her eyes swept over my outfit and she smiled. "Oh, darling, didn't you get the dress code card? I sent one to your apartment." I had never received any such card. "Well, you look sweet, very simple, almost Quaker-like." She said it loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Sarah prefers understated fashion. So refreshing in this age of excess, don't you think?" Everyone within earshot understood exactly what she meant. I couldn't afford anything better. Evan took my arm. "You look perfect," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction, and I could see the embarrassment in his eyes. Not embarrassment of me, but embarrassment for me, which was somehow worse. Inside the tent, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and a string quartet played in the corner. There was an open bar, waiters circulating with appetizers that cost more per bite than most people spent on dinner, and a display of engagement gifts that looked like a small jewelry store. Patricia immediately separated Evan and me, pulling him away to greet business associates while I stood alone near the bar. People glanced at me and whispered. I caught fragments of conversations. "Is that the fiancé? I heard she's a teacher's aide or something." Such a shame, he could have done so much better. Morgan appeared at my elbow, perfectly coiffed and wearing a dress that probably cost $10,000. "Having fun?" she asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's a lovely party." Mom really outdid herself. She wants everything to be perfect for Evan. The implication was clear. Everything except me. I excused myself and found a quiet corner where I could breathe. My hand went instinctively to my stomach, hidden beneath the flowing fabric of my dress. Just a few more hours, then everyone would know the truth. I pulled out my phone and queued up my presentation. All I had to do was connect to the venue's display system, and the screens mounted throughout the tent would show everything I'd prepared. The truth about Sterling Tech, about the acquisition, about Patricia's embezzlement, it was all ready. Evan found me eventually, bringing me a glass of sparkling water. "I'm sorry about the dress thing. I didn't know she was going to do that." "It's fine." "No, it's not. None of this is fine." He looked around at the opulent party, at his mother holding court in the center of the tent. "I didn't want this. I wanted something small, just us and a few friends." "I know, but after tonight, things will be different." He gave me a curious look. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, Patricia tapped a champagne glass with a fork. The sharp ting, ting, ting silenced the crowd. "If I could have everyone's attention, please. I'd like to make a toast to my son Evan and his fiancée." The pause before fiancé was deliberate, heavy with meaning. Everyone in the tent heard it. Evan and I moved to stand together in the center of the space. He took my hand, and I could feel it trembling slightly. Or maybe that was my own hand shaking. Patricia stood on a small platform where the band had been playing, giving her a clear view of everyone and giving everyone a clear view of her. She held her champagne glass high, and I noticed it was already mostly empty. Had she been drinking before the party started? When Evan first told me he was engaged, I had certain expectations. As a mother, you dream of who your child will marry. Her voice carried across the silent tent. 400 people hung on her every word. You hope for someone from a good family, someone with education from the right schools, someone who understands our world, someone who belongs. She looked directly at me. But Evan has always been unconventional, choosing teaching over the family business, choosing a modest life over the one he was born to. So perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised when he chose a girl with no family, no pedigree, no particular accomplishments. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't a toast anymore. This was an assassination. I've tried to be welcoming. I've invited Sarah into our home, into our family. I've attempted to educate her on our ways. But there's something I've discovered, something everyone here should know before this marriage proceeds. My heart started racing. This was it. She was going to expose the pregnancy before I had a chance to reveal anything on my own terms. Sarah has been lying to us, to all of us, keeping secrets. Evan's hand tightened on mine. Mom, don't do this. But she was already rolling, her voice growing stronger, fueled by champagne and years of paranoia and pain she'd never dealt with. She's pregnant, has been for months, and she never told Evan. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Evan turned to me, his face shocked. What? I was going to tell you tonight, I said desperately. I was going to tell everyone tonight. That's why I came prepared with a presentation. Patricia laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. A presentation? This isn't a business meeting, dear. This is your life, or what you thought would be your life. She took a long drink of champagne, and I realized with growing horror that she was drunker than I'd initially thought. This is the oldest trick in the book. Get pregnant, trap the rich man, secure your future. I've seen it before. It's exactly what happened to Evan's father. That's not true, I shouted, my voice cracking. If you would just let me explain. Explain what? The corporate meetings? The encrypted emails? I know about all of it, Sarah. I know you've been working with whoever's trying to buy our company. Corporate espionage for profit. Did you really think we wouldn't find out? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. You want to know the truth? Fine. Let me show you the truth. I connected to the display system, and the screens around the tent lit up with the Sterling Tech Solutions logo. But before I could advance to the next slide, Patricia picked up a full bottle of wine from the ice bucket next to her. This is what I think of liars and schemers. She stepped off the platform and walked toward me. 400 people watched in absolute silence as she raised the bottle high over my head. Then she tipped it. Cold red wine cascaded over me, soaking into my hair, my face, my carefully chosen cream dress. It ran down my body like blood, spreading across the fabric, pooling at my feet on the marble floor of the tent. I stood there dripping, shaking, unable to process what had just happened. My hand went instinctively to my stomach, protecting my baby even as wine dripped off my chin. Patricia saw the gesture. Of course, protect your meal ticket. Morgan started a slow clap, mocking and cruel. A few other people joined in, laughing nervously. Most stood in shocked silence, phones out, filming everything. I looked at Evan, standing 3 feet away, wine splashed on his suit from proximity to the pour. Say something. Please defend me. His face showed a dozen emotions at once: hurt, betrayal, confusion, anger. The pause stretched into eternity. Finally, he spoke. You lied to me about being pregnant for 5 months. I can explain. Please, if you just let me. I don't want explanations right now. I need to think. I need air. He didn't leave the tent, but he stepped back, creating distance between us. It felt like the Grand Canyon opening up at my feet. You want to know what I've been hiding? My voice came out stronger than I felt. Fine. Let me show everyone exactly who I am. I wiped wine from my phone screen and advanced the presentation. My photo appeared on every screen, professional shot, me in a business suit. CEO and founder, Jasmine Sarah Mitchell Sterling, I read aloud. Sterling Tech Solutions. Company valuation, $1.2 billion. The tent erupted in chaos. People standing up, shouting questions, pulling out their own phones to verify what they were seeing. My name is Sarah Sterling. I built my company from absolutely nothing. I started coding in public libraries because I couldn't afford a computer. I lived in my car for 8 months after my mother died. I sold my first patent at 24 for $8 million. Today, my company is worth over $1 billion. Patricia's face had gone completely white. That's impossible. You called me nothing. You said I had no achievements, no worth. You humiliated me for months trying to drive me away from your son. But here's what you did not know. Next slide, Ashwine. Pending acquisition, Blackwell Industries. Purchase price, $800 million. Buyer, Sterling Tech Solutions. James stood up from his table, his face a mask of shock. Board members throughout the tent started talking all at once. Your company is $120 million in debt, Patricia. It'll be bankrupt in 6 months without this acquisition. I was going to save it. Save 2,000 Rs, preserve Evan's family legacy. I was going to surprise him by buying his family's company as a wedding gift. I advanced to the next slides. Bank records, offshore accounts, false invoices, forensic audit results. But you want to talk about lies? Let's talk about the $25 million you embezzled over 3 years. Let's talk about the fraud you've been hiding from your own board. Let's talk about how you've been stealing from your family to build yourself an escape fund. Board members were shouting now. Patricia tried to speak, but no one was listening to her anymore. Everyone was looking at the screens, at the irrefutable evidence of her crimes. So yes, Patricia, I'm pregnant with your grandchild, and yes, I own your company, and yes, Suddenly I doubled over in pain. Sharp, intense cramping radiated through my abdomen. I looked down and saw wetness spreading between my legs, darker than wine. Blood. No, 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 no. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor. The wine pooled around me mixed with something else, something that shouldn't be there. Evan rushed forward and caught me before my head hit the marble. Sarah, stay with me. The baby, I gasped, tears streaming down my face. Please, the baby. Rachel pushed through the crowd. I hadn't even known she was there, invited as a guest. I'm calling 911, everyone back. The pain was unbearable. I could feel myself bleeding, feel my body betraying me and my baby. Evan held me, murmuring words I couldn't understand over the ringing in my ears. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I should have told you. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry. Don't talk, just breathe. Help is coming. You're going to be okay. I looked past him and saw Patricia standing frozen, the empty wine bottle still in her hand. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked truly afraid. Mom, what did we do? Morgan said, her voice breaking. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was 400 people staring at me, their phones still recording, documenting every moment of my destruction. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and urgent voices. Paramedics worked over me, asking questions I couldn't focus on answering. All I could think about was the baby, the tiny heartbeat I'd heard just 2 weeks ago at my last ultrasound. Please be okay. Please be okay. Please be okay. Evan held my hand the entire ride, his face pale. You're going to be fine. Both of you are going to be fine. I wanted to believe him, but the cramping was getting worse, and I could feel blood soaking through the blankets they'd wrapped around me. At Massachusetts General Hospital, they rushed me into surgery. Dr. Williams was already there, having been called by Rachel. She squeezed my shoulder before they put me under. We're going to take good care of you and your baby. Stay strong, Sarah. Then the anesthesia pulled me under, and I dreamed of my mother. She was young and healthy, standing in our old kitchen before everything fell apart. She was making pancakes and singing along to the radio. Baby, she said, turning to look at me, you have to stop trying to control everything. Sometimes you have to trust people. But they'll hurt me, they'll use me. Some will, but the right ones won't, and you'll never know which is which until you take the risk. I woke up in a recovery room, groggy and disoriented. The first thing I felt was the IV in my arm. The second thing was Evan's hand holding mine. You're awake. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. The baby? My voice came out as a croak. Alive, hanging on. They stopped the bleeding and delayed labor, but Sarah... He paused, struggling with the words. You're on complete bed rest for the rest of your pregnancy. Any stress, any exertion, and you could go into labor. At 20 weeks, the baby wouldn't survive. I started crying, relief and fear mixing together. I almost killed our baby. No, you didn't. This wasn't your fault. I should have told you about everything, about the company, about the pregnancy. I should have trusted you. He pulled his chair closer to the bed. I'm hurt that you didn't. That's real, and I won't pretend it isn't. But I understand why you were scared. My mother proved exactly why you were right not to trust my family. Your father, my father was a cheater and a coward. He made his own choices. But my mother has been using his betrayal to justify being cruel for years. She's been destroying women, driving them away, convinced they're all trying to hurt us. I see that now. I should have seen it months ago. Dr. Williams entered, reading from a tablet. Sarah, I need you to understand the severity of your situation. You almost lost this baby tonight. The stress, the physical trauma, everything combined created the perfect storm. But the baby's okay now. For now, but you need complete bed rest. No work, no stress, minimal physical activity. You'll need someone with you at all times in case something changes. But my company, the acquisition, choose the company or the baby. There's no middle ground anymore. I looked at Evan, then at the monitors beeping steadily nearby. The baby, always the baby. Good, then we'll get through this together. Dr. Williams made notes on her tablet. I'll discharge you tomorrow morning with detailed instructions. Evan, are you prepared to help care for her? Yes, whatever she needs. After Dr. Williams left, we sat in silence for a while. Finally, Evan spoke. I followed you to the hospital 3 weeks ago, after the spa incident. I heard you talking to Rachel about the baby, about the fall, about being high risk. My blood ran cold. You knew? I knew you were pregnant and hiding it. I knew you'd been hurt, and my mother found me in the hallway and convinced me that the baby probably wasn't mine, that you were running some kind of like the woman who destroyed my father. Evan, I almost believed her. For about 3 hours, I almost believed that you were using me. Then I realized something. My father's mistress didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. He made choices that led to consequences, and my mother has been so terrified of being hurt again that she became the monster. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the Boston skyline. When I saw you collapse tonight, bleeding, terrified of losing our baby, I knew. Everything you did because you were scared, not because you were malicious. You were just scared. I'm so sorry. I know, and we'll work through it. But Sarah, no more secrets, not ever. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be parents together, we have to trust each other completely. I promise, no more secrets. A knock on the door interrupted us. Marcus entered hesitantly, carrying a large folder. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. A big one. Marcus sat down and opened the folder. Blackwell's board panicked with the party. They've accepted a counteroffer from Ravencrest Capital. It's a vulture fund that specializes in buying distressed companies, liquidating assets, and profiting from bankruptcy. How much did they offer? Evan asked. $850 million. $50 million more than our offer. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my abdomen. We have to counteroffer. We can't let them liquidate Blackwell Industries. 2,000 people will lose their jobs. Sarah, the doctor said no stress, Evan said firmly, pushing me gently back against the pillows. But those families, Marcus cleared his throat. There's another option. We don't outbid Ravencrest. We expose them. He pulled out more documents. Ravencrest has a pattern. Over the last 5 years, they've acquired 3 companies. All 3 were liquidated within 18 months. Average job loss, 1,800 per company. They strip the assets, sell the real estate, pocket the difference, and move on. If the board understood what they're really signing, I said, they might reconsider. But it would have to come from someone they trust, not from Sterling Tech, and definitely not from you right now. Evan looked at the documents, his face thoughtful. It would have to be James. He's COO. The board trusts him. Can you get him to do it? Marcus asked. After everything that happened tonight? I don't know, but I have to try. Patricia arrived at the hospital an hour later. Evan saw her through the small window in the door and went out to intercept her before she could enter my room. I could hear their conversation through the door. I need to know if she's okay, if the baby, you don't get to care now. You did this. I didn't know she would collapse. I didn't know. You threw wine on a pregnant woman in front of 400 people. What did you think would happen? There was a long pause. Then Patricia's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I was trying to protect you from another gold digger, from someone who would destroy you like that woman destroyed your father. Dad destroyed himself. Evan's voice rose. He cheated, he gambled, he made horrible choices. That woman didn't make him do any of those things. He did them himself. I lost him because I wasn't enough. I wasn't successful enough, beautiful enough, young enough. You lost him because he was broken, and you've been so terrified of it happening again that you've become the monster in the story. Sarah was never trying to hurt me. She was trying to save us, all of us, and you might have killed my child. I heard Patricia start to cry, deep, wrenching sobs. I lost a baby once, did you know that? At 24 weeks, I chose work over rest, chose a business trip over doctor's orders, and I lost her. Mom, I never forgave myself, and I couldn't bear to watch you get hurt the way I was hurt. But I've been hurting everyone instead. You need help, real help, professional help. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Evan said, you can see her briefly, but if you upset her, I'll have security remove you. Patricia entered my room hesitantly, her makeup ruined from crying, her expensive dress wrinkled. She looked nothing like the polished CEO who'd poured wine over my head a few hours ago. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. I could have said so many things. I could have screamed at her, blamed her, told her to leave and never come back. Instead, I said, I know about your daughter, the baby you lost. She flinched like I'd struck her. How? Marcus found the records. We were trying to understand why you were so threatened by me. I touched my stomach gently. I'm sorry for your loss. No mother should have to go through that. I don't deserve your compassion. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway because I'm choosing to be different from you. She stood there, broken and humbled, and I saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a monster, but as a deeply wounded woman who'd been lashing out in pain for years. The board is meeting tomorrow morning to finalize the Ravencrest deal, she said quietly. James called an emergency session. He's going to present evidence that I embezzled funds. He's going to recommend my resignation. Good. He's my son. And he has a duty to 2,000 employees who don't deserve to lose their jobs because you made bad choices. Patricia nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I hope the baby is okay. I hope you both are okay. After she left, Evan returned to sit beside me. That was generous of you, compassionate, when she didn't deserve it. I learned something tonight, I said softly. Revenge doesn't heal you. It just makes you into the person who hurt you. I don't want to become Patricia. You could never become Patricia. I was heading that way, planning my grand reveal, wanting to humiliate her in front of everyone, prove I was better than her. That's not who I want to be. That's not the mother I want our daughter to have. Our daughter? I smiled through my exhaustion. Dr. Williams told me earlier, we're having a girl. Evan's eyes filled with tears. He kissed my forehead, then my belly, then my lips. I love you, both of you, so much. I love you too, and I'm going to do better. Be better. We fell asleep like that, him in the uncomfortable hospital chair, me in the bed, our hands linked between us. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight my baby was alive. Evan was by my side, and I'd chosen compassion over vengeance. It was a start. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Dr. Williams discharged me with strict instructions. Bed rest, no stress, regular monitoring. Evan took a leave of absence from teaching and moved into my apartment to take care of me. You don't have to do this, I said as he helped me into the car. I can hire a nurse. I'm the father, I want to do this. At my apartment, he set me up in bed with my laptop, phone, and everything I might need within easy reach. Then he made me lunch, brought me water, and adjusted my pillows at least 6 times until I laughed and told him to stop fussing. I've never taken care of anyone before, he admitted. I'm not sure I'm doing it right. You're perfect. My phone rang. Marcus. The board meeting is in 3 hours. James is going to present everything. Patricia's embezzlement, the Ravencrest information, Sterling Tech's original offer. But he needs someone from your company there to confirm the offer still stands. I can't go, doctor's orders. I know, I'll go as your representative. But Sarah, there's something you should know. Patricia's planning to attend. Can she do that after everything? She's still CEO until the board votes otherwise. She has every right to be there. I closed my eyes, exhaustion and anxiety warring in my chest. Marcus, make sure they understand about Ravencrest. Those jobs matter. Those families matter. I will. Get some rest. I'll call you after. While Marcus headed to the Blackwell Industries boardroom, Evan sat with me, reading aloud from a book about pregnancy and childbirth. He kept stopping to ask questions. It says here that babies can hear voices in the womb. Should I be talking to her? If you want to, he leaned close to my stomach and spoke softly. Hi, baby girl. It's your dad. I know you're having a rough time in there, but you're going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. I started crying, hormones and relief and fear all mixing together. Did I say something wrong? No, you said everything right. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. How are you feeling? Need anything? I texted back. Tired, but okay. Baby's stable. Evan's taking good care of us. Good. Let me know if you need anything. And Sarah, I'm proud of you for not destroying Patricia when you had the chance. Takes real strength to choose mercy over revenge. Did it, though? Or was I just too tired to keep fighting? At the Blackwell Industries headquarters, the emergency board meeting had just begun. Marcus told me about it later, filling in all the details I missed. James called the meeting to order in the main conference room. 12 board members sat around a massive oak table, looking tired and anxious. Patricia sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed despite everything that had happened the night before. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, James began. We need to discuss the Ravencrest capital offer and some information that's recently come to light. He connected his laptop to the display screen and pulled up the first slide, Patricia's offshore accounts. Over the past 3 years, our CEO has embezzled $25 million from company funds. These are the bank records, traced through forensic accounting, false invoices, shell companies, elaborate fraud. The board erupted. Patricia tried to speak, but James continued. Additionally, she's been hiding the true extent of our financial crisis from this board. We're not $10 million in debt, as we've been told. We're $120 million in debt and hemorrhaging $8 million per quarter. One of the board members, an older gentleman named Harold, stood up. Patricia, is this true? She looked around the table at people she'd worked with for decades, people who trusted her. I was trying to protect the company. By stealing from it? Another board member demanded. I was building a contingency fund, in case everything fell apart, in case we needed to start over. You were protecting yourself, James said quietly. Not the company, not the employees, just yourself. Marcus stood from his position at the back of the room. If I may address the board? My name is Marcus Reed, CFO of Sterling Tech Solutions. We submitted an offer to acquire Blackwell Industries for $800 million. That offer still stands. Harold turned to him. But Ravencrest offered $850 million. They did. But do you know what Ravencrest does with the companies they acquire? Marcus pulled up the next presentation. 3 companies, all liquidated, thousands of jobs lost. They don't save companies. They strip them for parts and sell the pieces. Every single acquisition in the past 5 years has resulted in complete liquidation within 18 months. If you accept their offer, every employee here will lose their job. The board members looked at each other, the implications sinking in. Sterling Tech's offer includes full integration, no layoffs, and investment in growth. We're not buying Blackwell to destroy it. We're buying it to build it. Why? Patricia asked, her voice hollow. Why would you do that? Marcus looked directly at her. Because Sarah Mitchell, our CEO, fell in love with your son. And despite everything you've done to her, she still wants to save his family's legacy. The room fell silent. Finally, the board chairman spoke. All those in favor of accepting Sterling Tech's offer? Every hand went up except Patricia's. All those in favor of requesting Patricia Blackwell's immediate resignation? Again, every hand, including James's. Patricia looked at her sons, both raising their hands against her, and something broke in her expression. I'll clear out my office today. Marcus called me an hour later with the news. It's done. They accepted our offer. Patricia's resigned, the acquisition will close within 60 days, and not a single job will be lost. I felt relief wash over me. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Sarah, there's something else. Patricia's checking herself into a treatment facility. A real one, not some luxury spa. She asked me to tell you that she knows she needs help. After we hung up, I told Evan what had happened. My mother's going to treatment? Apparently. He sat quietly for a moment. I don't know how to feel about that. Glad she's getting help, angry it took so long, sad it came to this. You can feel all of those things at once. They don't cancel each other out. When did you get so wise? About the time I almost lost everything that mattered. We sat together in comfortable silence, his hand on my belly, feeling for movement that was still too early to detect. What do we tell her? Evan asked. Our daughter, when she's old enough to understand. What do we tell her about all of this? I thought about it carefully. We tell her the truth, that people are complicated, that hurt people, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean choosing not to let pain define you. That's good. But can we wait until she's at least 12 to have that conversation? I laughed for the first time in days. Deal. The next months passed in a blur of bed rest, doctor's appointments, and learning to let people help me. It was harder than running a billion-dollar company, this business of surrendering control and trusting others. Marcus ran Sterling Tech in my absence, video calling me daily with updates I wasn't allowed to stress about. Rachel visited twice a week with books and gossip and reality checks when I started spiraling into worry. Evan learned to cook, badly, and insisted I eat every slightly burnt dinner with gratitude and pretend appreciation. At 24 weeks, we had another ultrasound. Dr. Williams smiled as she moved the wand across my growing belly. She's thriving. All signs point to a healthy baby. Really? Even after everything? Even after everything. Bodies are remarkable. They know how to heal, given half a chance. But at 30 weeks, I was finally allowed to sit up for more than an hour at a time. At 34 weeks, I graduated to short walks around the apartment. At 37 weeks, Marty Williams declared me full term and ready. You did it, Sarah. You made it. I'd made it. We'd made it. The Sterling Blackwell acquisition closed exactly on schedule. On paper, I now owned the company that my mother-in-law had built. In reality, James ran operations while I participated via video call from bed, and we both knew he was better suited to the day-to-day work. Patricia sent cards from the treatment facility in Arizona where she'd checked herself in. 1 card a month, always brief, never asking for anything. I'm learning about PTSD and how trauma affects behavior. I'm working with a therapist who specializes in grief and loss. I'm starting to understand why I hurt people. Understanding doesn't excuse it, but it's a start. Evan read them aloud to me, and we'd talk about whether to respond. Eventually we did, sending brief updates about the pregnancy and the company. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. We were just people trying to heal. Morgan had checked herself into a different facility to deal with her addiction. She sent cards too, apologizing for the spa incident, for her role in Patricia's campaign against me, for being too weak to stand up when it mattered. I'm learning to be stronger, she wrote. I'm learning that enabling someone's worst behavior because you're afraid isn't love, it's cowardice. James visited every week, bringing work documents and baby gifts in equal measure. He never apologized directly, but his loyalty to the company's transformation spoke louder than words. Evan and I got married in a quiet ceremony at City Hall with just Marcus and Rachel as witnesses. No fancy dress, no 400 guests, no drama. Just 2 people promising to love each other and the baby growing between them. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the justice of the peace said. You may kiss your bride. Evan kissed me softly, his hand on my very pregnant belly, and I thought about how wrong I'd been about everything. About control, about power, about what actually mattered in life. I thought I needed to own the company finalizing the $800 million deal. I thought I needed to prove I wasn't nothing. But standing there in a simple dress with a borrowed ring, married to a high school teacher who chose purpose over money every single day, I finally understood. I'd never been nothing. I'd just been terrified of letting anyone see who I really was. At 38 weeks pregnant, I went into labor at 3 in the morning. The contractions started as a dull ache and quickly escalated into waves of intensity that took my breath away. Evan, it's time." He jumped out of bed like he'd been electrocuted, grabbed the hospital bag we'd packed weeks ago, and helped me to the car. The drive to Massachusetts General was a blur of traffic lights, and Evan muttering, "Breathe, just breathe," even though I was breathing fine, and he was the one hyperventilating. Dr. Williams met us in the delivery room, looking calm and confident. "Ready to meet your daughter?" I've been ready for months. The labor lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of pain and fear and determination, and finally, a sound that made everything worth it, a baby's first cry. "It's a girl," Dr. Williams announced unnecessarily, placing the tiny, perfect creature on my chest. "Congratulations." She was beautiful, red-faced and screaming and absolutely perfect. Evan was crying, I was crying, even Marcus cried when he came to visit an hour later. "Hi, baby girl," I whispered. "Hi, Maria. I'm your mama. I'm so glad you're here." We named her after my mother, the woman who'd worked herself to death so I could have a chance at life. The woman whose last words had been about protecting myself, about never letting anyone know my worth. But I'd learned something in the months since that engagement party, since the wine and the blood and the hospital and the healing. Your worth isn't something you hide. It's something you live every single day in how you treat people and what you choose to value. I'd been so afraid of being powerless that I'd made myself powerful in all the wrong ways. Money, control, secrets. None of it had protected me. All of it had nearly destroyed me. In the end, it was trust that saved me. Trust in Evan, in Marcus, in Rachel, in Dr. Williams. Trust that asking for help wasn't weakness. Trust that being vulnerable wasn't the same as being destroyed. Patricia came to the hospital the next day. She stood at the doorway asking permission with her eyes. I nodded and she approached slowly. She looked different from the polished CEO I'd first met. Simpler clothes, no makeup, her face open and uncertain. "She's beautiful," Patricia said softly. "Would you like to hold her?" Patricia looked shocked. "Are you sure?" "You're her grandmother. You made mistakes, terrible ones, but you're getting help. That matters." I placed Maria in her arms, and Patricia started crying. "I lost my daughter at 24 weeks. I never got to hold her. I never got to say goodbye." "What was her name?" "Rose. I was going to call her Rose." "Rose is a beautiful name." We sat in silence for a moment, just the four of us, me exhausted in the hospital bed, Evan hovering protectively nearby, Patricia holding her granddaughter, and tiny Maria sleeping peacefully through it all. "I'm moving to Arizona," Patricia said quietly. "My sister lives there. I'm buying a small house, something manageable. I need distance from the company, from the expectations, from everything that made me into someone I don't recognize. I think that's wise. Would you let me visit? Once a month, maybe? I'd like to be part of Maria's life, if you'll allow it." I looked at Evan. He nodded slightly. "Yes, we'll arrange it." Patricia handed Maria back to me, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Thank you for not destroying me. You could have. You had every right to. If I destroyed you, I would have become you. I chose differently." She smiled sadly. "Maria is lucky to have you as her mother." After she left, Evan climbed carefully into the hospital bed beside me, and we looked at our daughter together. "She's lucky to have both of us," he said. Yes, she is. The first year of Maria's life flew by in a chaos of diapers and sleepless nights and moments of pure joy. She had Evan's eyes and my determination, evident from the day she was born when she'd screamed her way into the world with absolute conviction. Sterling Blackwell Industries thrived under the merged leadership. I went back to work part-time when Maria was 6 months old, splitting my time between the office and home. James proved to be an excellent CEO of the manufacturing division, while I focused on technology integration and growth strategies. The company stock was up 40%. We'd added 300 new jobs. The acquisition that started as a secret rescue mission had become one of the most successful mergers in recent Boston business history. But none of that mattered as much as the Tuesday afternoon when Maria took her first steps, stumbling across the living room into Evan's arms while I captured it on video, crying and cheering at the same time. On the anniversary of the engagement party, Patricia came to visit from Arizona. We'd settled into a rhythm of monthly visits, supervised at first, then gradually less so as she proved she was committed to change. She looked healthier than I'd ever seen her. The sun had added color to her cheeks, and her smile reached her eyes in a way it never had before. "You look good," I said honestly. "I feel good. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I actually feel okay." She sat on the floor with Maria, who was busy destroying a tower of blocks with gleeful enthusiasm. "I've been in therapy 3 times a week," Patricia said, watching Maria play. "Working through the trauma, the grief, the control issues. My therapist says I have PTSD from losing my daughter and from my husband's betrayal. I've been operating from a place of fear for 30 years. That must have been exhausting." It was, but I didn't know any other way. Fear was all I knew. Maria crawled over and pulled herself up using Patricia's leg, babbling something that might have been Nana or might have been baby nonsense. "She's brilliant," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Like her mother. She's determined, like both her grandmothers." Patricia looked up at me, surprised. I've never thought of myself as her grandmother. Not really. I didn't think I'd earned it. "You're earning it now, that's what matters." We sat in comfortable silence while Maria played. Then Patricia said something I'd been wondering if she'd ever acknowledge. "I'm sorry, I've said it before, but I want to say it again, here on the anniversary of the worst thing I've ever done. I'm sorry for everything. For the humiliation, the cruelty, the whine, the danger I put you and Maria in. I'm sorry for being so broken that I couldn't see what a gift you were. Thank you for saying that. Do you forgive me?" I thought about it carefully. Yes. Not because you deserve it or because it didn't hurt, but because holding on to anger was poisoning me. "I forgave you for my sake, not yours." Patricia nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair." That evening, after Patricia left to catch her flight back to Arizona, I stood in my office at home, looking at the photos on my wall. Maria's first ultrasound. My mother, young and laughing. Evan and me on our wedding day. The Sterling Blackwell merger announcement. And there, in a simple frame, the wine-stained engagement party invitation. I'd had it professionally preserved, the red wine stains permanent on the cream paper. Evan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Why do you keep that?" "To remember." "Remember what? The worst night of your life?" "To remember what I learned, that owning the company, finalizing the $800 million deal didn't matter. That being powerful didn't protect me. That secrets don't keep you safe. They just keep you lonely." I turned in his arms to face him. I learned that night that you can have all the money in the world and still have nothing if you don't have people who truly see you. Deep thoughts for a Tuesday. I laughed. "Maria's first birthday is next week. I'm feeling philosophical." "Well, while you're being philosophical, I should tell you something." "What?" "I got a job offer, department chair at my school. It's more money, more responsibility, more impact on the students." "That's amazing. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It would mean less time with Maria, less flexibility. And I've been thinking." "About what?" He led me over to the couch and we sat down together. "About starting a foundation, using some of your money with your permission to fund coding programs for underprivileged kids, not just in Boston, but nationwide." "The Maria Foundation?" "Actually, I was thinking the Maria Mitchell Sterling Foundation. After your mother and our daughter both." Tears pricked my eyes. "Evan, that's perfect. We could hire teachers, provide equipment, offer full-ride scholarships. Give kids the same chance you had to build something from nothing." "Yes, absolutely yes." We sat there making plans, dreaming about the kids we could help. the lives we could change. And I thought about how far I'd come from the terrified girl sleeping in her car, teaching herself to code under streetlights. I'd built an empire in secret, convinced that hiding my worth would protect me. I'd almost lost everything learning that the real protection came from connection, from vulnerability, from trusting the right people. Maria made a sound from her crib in the next room, and we both jumped up to check on her. She was fine, just rolling over in her sleep, her tiny fist curled under her chin. "She's going to be amazing," Evan whispered. "She already is." 2 weeks later, we hosted the first meeting of the Maria Mitchell Sterling Foundation's Board of Directors. Marcus agreed to serve as CFO. Rachel joined as legal counsel. James signed on to help with corporate partnerships. Even Morgan, now 2 years sober, volunteered to run the marketing and outreach programs. We gathered in the Sterling Blackwell conference room, the same room where Patricia's crimes had been exposed, where the board had voted to accept our acquisition. But today it held something different. Hope. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "A year ago, I thought power meant control. I thought success meant never showing weakness. I thought if I could just own the company, finalizing the $800 million deal, I'd finally be safe." I looked around at the faces of people who'd become my family. I was wrong. Safety doesn't come from power. It comes from this: people who show up, people who care, people who choose to build something meaningful together. So let's build something meaningful. Let's help kids who are sleeping in cars and studying under streetlights. Let's give them the chance someone gave me. The foundation launched 6 months later. We started with 10 coding centers in 5 cities. By the end of the year, we'd expanded to 20 centers serving over 2,000 kids. I taught at the Boston Center every Saturday morning, just like I had before everything changed. But now Maria came with me, playing in a corner of the classroom while I helped teenagers debug their code and dream their dreams. One Saturday, a 16-year-old girl named Jasmine stayed after class to talk to me. "Miss Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you know you'd make it? When you were living in your bar, how did you know you wouldn't fail?" I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, terrified I was kidding myself, that I'd end up like my mother, working 3 jobs and dying young. I didn't know. I just decided that if I was going to fail, it wouldn't be because I didn't try. So I tried. Every single day, I tried. What if people judge me? What if they think I'm not good enough? Some will, but the right people will see your potential, not your circumstances. And eventually you'll be so successful that what people thought won't matter anymore. She smiled. "Like you?" "Like you, because you're going to be amazing, Jasmine. I can see it." She left with her head a little higher, her shoulders a little straighter. And I thought about the girl I'd been at her age, hungry and scared and desperate for someone to believe in me. I'd become that person for other people. I'd taken my pain and my fear and my hard-won success and turned it into something that could help others. That was power, real power, not the kind that came from owning companies or hiding secrets. The kind that came from showing up, from being vulnerable, from using your story to light the way for someone else. On Maria's first birthday, we threw a party at our apartment. Small, intimate, just family and close friends. Patricia flew in from Arizona. Morgan brought her girlfriend, the first time she'd introduced her to the family. James came with his wife and their new baby. Marcus brought a ridiculously large stuffed elephant. Rachel showed up with homemade cookies and terrible jokes. Evan made a birthday cake that collapsed on one side but tasted delicious. Maria smashed her face into it enthusiastically, getting frosting everywhere and laughing with pure joy. I stood back and watched everyone I loved gathered in one room, and I thought about the engagement party a year ago. The wine, the blood, the humiliation, the terror. If I could go back and warn myself, what would I say? I'd say, "You're going to survive this. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've experienced, but you're going to come out stronger." I'd say, trust people sooner, tell the truth sooner, ask for help sooner. I'd say, the woman pouring wine on you is broken, not evil. She's terrified, not hateful. She'll get better eventually, and so will you. I'd say, unaware she owned the company finalizing the $800 million deal, your mother-in-law will pour wine on you in front of 400 people. And it will be the best, worst thing that ever happens to you. because it forced me to stop hiding. It forced me to trust. It forced me to choose between revenge and redemption. And I chose redemption. Not for Patricia's sake, but for mine, for Maria's, for the person I wanted to be. Patricia approached me at the party, holding a glass of sparkling cider. Can we talk just for a minute? We stepped out onto the small balcony, the sounds of the party muffled behind us. I wanted you to know something, Patricia said. I'm not coming back to Boston. Arizona is my home now. But I'm grateful for these visits, for the chance to know Maria T., for your forgiveness, even though I didn't deserve it. You're doing the work. That's what matters. I spent 30 years being afraid. Afraid of losing control, losing money, losing love. I hurt so many people because I was terrified of being hurt first. She looked out at the city lights. But you know what I learned in therapy? Fear is just another form of control. If I make everyone afraid of me, I never have to be vulnerable. I never have to risk real connection. And now? Now I'm learning to be vulnerable. It's terrifying, but it's also freeing. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Patricia said, "Thank you for not becoming me. When you had every reason to, when I'd pushed you to your breaking point, you chose mercy. That took more strength than I've ever had. I chose mercy for my sake, not yours, because I saw what bitterness did to you, and I didn't want that life. That's wisdom. I hope Maria inherits it." Inside, someone started singing Happy Birthday. We went back in to watch Maria destroy her cake, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. And I thought, this is what matters. Not the company, not the money, not the power. This moment, this love, this family we've built from the broken pieces of our pasts. 5 years passed in what felt like a heartbeat. Maria started kindergarten, already reading at a second grade level, and announcing she wanted to be a coder like mommy when she grew up. The foundation expanded to 100 centers in 30 states. Sterling Blackwell Industries continued to thrive, now employing over 5,000 people. Patricia visited once a month like clockwork, never missing Maria's birthday or holidays. She'd found peace in Arizona, working part-time at a women's shelter, and mentoring other women recovering from trauma. She'd never fully regained what she'd lost, but she'd built something new from the ruins. Morgan celebrated 5 years of sobriety and launched her own marketing firm, specializing in nonprofits and social enterprises. James took over as CEO of Sterling Blackwell when I stepped down to focus on the foundation. Rachel made detective lieutenant and still showed up for Saturday morning coffee, gossiping and laughing like we'd known each other forever. Evan became principal of his school and started writing a book about educational equity. Every evening, he'd come home and tell me stories about his students, his eyes shining with pride at their accomplishments. And me, I taught coding to kids every Saturday morning, ran foundation strategy meetings twice a week, and spent the rest of my time being Maria's mom. I'd learned to delegate, to trust, to admit when I needed help. I was no longer the girl who'd coded in libraries and slept in her car. But I was no longer the woman who'd hidden behind secrets and shells either. I was something new, a mother, a teacher, a philanthropist, a friend. Someone who'd learned that real power came from lifting others up, not from standing above them. On the 6th anniversary of the engagement party, I did something I'd been planning for months. I rented out the same venue where Patricia had poured wine on me, invited many of the same guests, and hosted a charity gala for the foundation. The tent was decorated exactly the same: crystal chandeliers, string quartet, white tablecloths. But instead of an engagement party, it was a celebration of 6 years of transformation. Photos lined the walls. Kids we'd helped graduate high school and college. Coders who'd gone on to work at major tech companies. Families who'd escaped poverty through education and opportunity. And in the center of the tent, framed under glass, the wine-stained invitation from 6 years ago. I stood at the microphone looking out at 400 people, many of whom had witnessed my humiliation. 6 years ago, in this exact spot, my mother-in-law poured a bottle of wine over my head in front of all of you. Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd, people glanced at Patricia, who sat at a table near the front, her face serene. She called me nothing. She accused me of being a gold digger, a liar, a schemer, And I stood here, covered in wine, bleeding, terrified I was losing my baby, and I realized something. I paused, looking at the faces staring back at me. She was right. Not about me being a gold digger, but about me lying, about keeping secrets, about not being honest about who I really was. I was so afraid of being vulnerable that I'd built walls around myself so high I couldn't see over them anymore. Unaware she owned the company, finalizing her $800 million deal, my mother-in-law poured wine on me, and it was the worst night of my life. It was also the moment everything changed. I gestured to the photos around us. These kids, these families, this foundations, all of it exists because I learned something that night. You can have all the power in the world and still have nothing if you're too afraid to trust people. Patricia Blackwell hurt me deeply. She almost cost me my daughter. She humiliated me when I was most vulnerable. But you know what else she did? She forced me to stop hiding. She forced me to tell the truth. And in doing so, she accidentally gave me the greatest gift: freedom from fear. Patricia stood up, and the room held its breath. She walked to the front and stood beside me at the microphone. May I? I nodded and handed her the microphone. I spent 30 years being afraid, Patricia said, her voice steady. I lost a baby. I lost a husband. I lost myself. And I dealt with that pain by hurting other people, especially women I perceived as threats. Sarah wasn't a threat. She was a gift. She was brilliant, kind, strong, everything my son needed, but I couldn't see it because I was blinded by fear and pain I'd never dealt with. She turned to look at me. 6 years ago, I tried to destroy you. Instead, you chose to save me. You saved my company, my family's legacy, and eventually you saved me by showing me what grace looks like. I can never undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to be better. And I can stand here in front of all these witnesses and say, Sarah Mitchell Sterling is the strongest person I've ever met. Not because she destroyed me when she could have, but because she chose not to. The room erupted in applause. Patricia hugged me, both of us crying, and I thought about all the ways we'd both changed. After the speeches, after the dinner, after most of the guests had left, I found myself standing in the exact spot where I'd collapsed 6 years ago. The tent was quiet now, just cleaning crews starting to break down tables. Evan found me there, Maria asleep on his shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how wrong I was, about everything. You were young and scared and traumatized. You did the best you could. I was so convinced that owning the company, finalizing the $800 million deal would make me powerful, that having money and success and control would keep me safe. And did it? No, it almost destroyed me. Real safety came from trusting you, from being vulnerable, from admitting I needed help. He shifted Maria to his other shoulder. Do you regret any of it? I thought about that carefully. The pain, the fear, the blood on marble, the terrifying nights wondering if my baby would survive. No, because it led to this, to us, to Maria, to the foundation and the kids we're helping, and the person I became instead of the person I was becoming. Who were you becoming? Someone like Patricia. Powerful but alone. Rich but miserable. In control but terrified. And who are you now? I looked at my sleeping dog on my shoulder. At my husband, at the framed wine-stained invitation that represented my worst moment and my greatest transformation. I'm someone who learned that you can own everything and have nothing, and you can have budding and still be rich in the things that actually matter. That's very philosophical. Maria's starting to rub off on me. She asked me yesterday what the most important thing in the world was. What did you tell her? I told her it was people, not things, not money, not success. People who see you, who love you, who show up when you need them. Evan kissed the top of Maria's head, then mine. Let's go home. We walked out of the tent into the cool night air. Behind us, the cleaning crew packed up the remnants of the party. Tomorrow the tent would come down, the tables would be stored away, and the venue would return to just being a garden. But the memory would remain, not just of humiliation and pain, but of transformation and growth and choosing to be better than your worst moment. I'd spent my whole life trying to control everything, convinced that if I just had enough power, enough money, enough success, I'd finally be safe. What I'd learned was that safety doesn't come from what you own or control. It comes from who you trust and how you choose to respond when everything falls apart. Unaware she owned the company finalizing her $800 million deal, my mother-in-law poured wine on me in front of 400 people. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was also the moment I stopped running and started living. And in the end, that made all the difference. 10 years after the engagement party, I stood in front of a Senate committee testifying about educational equity and technology access. The Maria Mitchell Sterling Foundation had grown into a national organization with 500 centers, serving over 50,000 kids a year. Maria, now 11 years old, sat in the gallery with Evan, watching her mother speak to lawmakers about the importance of coding education for underprivileged youth. Every child deserves a chance, I said into the microphone. It shouldn't matter if they're sleeping in cars or living in shelters. Potential is everywhere. Opportunity is not. After the testimony, a senator approached me. That was powerful, Ms. Sterling. You speak from experience. I do. I was one of those kids once. And now you're a billionaire philanthropist changing lives. That's the American dream. I thought about that phrase. The American dream. Was that what this was? With respect, Senator, the American dream shouldn't require superhuman effort and extraordinary luck. My mother died because she couldn't afford health care. I lived in my car because there was no safety net. Yes, I succeeded, but how many brilliant kids didn't because they didn't get the breaks I got? That's why we need programs like yours. That's why we need systemic change. Programs help, but they're band-aids on a broken system. I'd become more politically active over the years, speaking out about issues I'd once been too afraid to address. Because once you stop hiding, once you stop being afraid of what people might think, you find your voice. That evening, we had dinner at a small restaurant in D.C. Marcus had flown in for the testimony, and Rachel video called from Boston, where she was now deputy commissioner. You were brilliant today, Marcus said. The foundation has come so far. We've come so far. None of this would exist without you. He raised his glass to 10 years of transformation. We clinked glasses, and I thought about everything that had changed. Sterling Blackwell Industries was now a Fortune 500 company. The foundation had become one of the most respected nonprofits in the country. Maria was thriving, Evan was writing his second book, and I was finally comfortable in my own skin. Patricia had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully in her sleep in Arizona. She'd spent her final years at peace, having made amends where she could and accepted where she couldn't. Her funeral had been small and quiet, just family, and we'd scattered her ashes in the desert she'd come to love. Mom would be proud, James had said, not of who she was, but of who she became. That seemed like the best epitaph any of us could hope for. Morgan, now running one of the most successful marketing firms in Boston, had married her girlfriend and adopted 2 children. She and I had coffee every month, comparing notes on motherhood and laughing about how different our lives were from what we'd imagined. Remember when I pushed you at the spa, she'd said during one of our coffees? I still have nightmares about it. You were being controlled by someone in active addiction. You've made amends. Let it go. Have you? Let it go, I mean? Mostly. Some days I still have dreams about the menan, the blood, the fear. But those dreams are less frequent now, and they don't define me anymore. Back in our hotel room in D.C., after Maria had fallen asleep in the adjoining room, Evan and I lay in bed talking. Do you ever think about what your life would be like if you'd never met me? He asked. I'd probably be richer, lonelier, and more miserable. You'd be richer. You're already a billionaire. I'd have kept working obsessively, building wealth I didn't need, convinced more money would finally make me feel safe. Instead, you taught me that safety comes from connection, not control. I taught you that? You and Maria and everyone who showed up when I needed them most. He pulled me closer. I love you. I loved you when you were pretending to be a nonprofit worker making poverty wages. I love you now that you're testifying before Congress. The circumstances changed, but you didn't. Not in the ways that matter. I changed a lot. You stopped hiding. But the person underneath, the brilliant, driven, compassionate woman I fell in love with, she was always there. I thought about the girl I'd been at 17, standing at her mother's grave with holes in her shoes. I thought about the woman I'd been at 28, hiding behind secrets and shell corporations. And I thought about who I was now, still driven, still ambitious, but no longer afraid. Do you know what I realized? I said. My mother's last words were, "Don't ever let anyone know what you're worth." She was trying to protect me, but she was also teaching me to hide, to be small, to trust no one. And and I spent years following that advice. It kept me safe, but also kept me isolated, kept me from real connection, real love, real life. What would you tell Maria if you were dying and could only leave her with one piece of advice? I thought about my daughter, fierce and smart and already more confident than I'd been at her age. I'd tell her, your worth is not what you own or what you achieve. It's who you are when no one's looking and how you treat people who can't do anything for you. And I'd tell her, trust carefully, but trust, because a life without trust isn't safety, it's prison. That's good advice. I learned it the hard way. The next morning before we flew back to Boston, I took Maria to visit my mother's grave. We'd moved her body from the paupers' cemetery where she'd been buried to a beautiful plot with a proper headstone. Maria Rose Mitchell, the stone read, "Beloved mother, your sacrifice gave your daughter wings." Maria placed flowers on the grave, then looked up at me. "Grandma Maria died when you were my age?" "A little older. I was 17. "Were you scared?" "Terrified. I didn't know how I'd survive." "But you did. You became super successful and helped lots of kids." "I did, because your grandma worked really hard to give me opportunities, and because I decided not to waste them." Maria thought about this carefully. "When I grow up, I want to help kids too. You can do anything you want. Be anything you want. Even if people say I can't." I thought about Patricia, about the Wyden, about all the people over the years who doubted me or tried to tear me down. Especially then. The word no is just someone's opinion. It doesn't define what's possible. We stood there for a moment, 3 generations of Mitchell women, my mother who died too young, me who'd survived and thrived, and Maria who'd grow up knowing she was loved and capable and enough exactly as she was. "I wish I could have met her," Maria said softly. "Me too. She would have loved you so much." "Tell me again about when you lived in your car." I'd told her the story many times, never hiding the hard parts, never pretending it was easier than it was. I was 18, living in a 2-door Honda, studying computer science at night and working during the day. I was scared all the time, but I kept going because I didn't have another choice. "You always had choices, Mom. You could have given up." "That's true. I chose to keep going. That was the most important choice I ever made." "What was the second most important choice?" I thought about it carefully. "Trusting your father, letting someone see the real me, even though I was terrified." "And the third?" "Choosing mercy over revenge, choosing to help your grandmother Patricia instead of destroying her." Maria nodded like this made perfect sense. At 11, she'd already learned lessons about compassion and complexity that had taken me decades to understand. We walked back to the car, leaving the flowers in the past behind. Tomorrow, I'd go back to running the foundation, to advocacy work, to the life I'd built. But today I was just a mother teaching her daughter about strength and grace and the power of choosing who you want to be. That night, back home in Boston, I sat in my office looking at the framed wine-stained invitation one last time. Tomorrow, I'd donate it to a museum as part of an exhibit on women in technology and business. The inscription I'd added years ago still made me smile. The night I learned what matters. Evan came in and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Ready to let it go? More than ready, it served its purpose. Which was? Reminding me that my worst moment doesn't define me. My response to it does. He kissed the top of my head. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For everything you've built, but more for who you've become. Thank you, I'm proud of me too." And I was. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely proud of who I was. Not because of what I'd achieved or accumulated, but because of the choices I'd made when tested. Unaware she owned the company finalizing the $800 million deal, my mother-in-law had poured wine on me in front of 400 people. She tried to destroy me, to humiliate me, to drive me away from her family. Instead, she'd accidentally freed me from hiding, from fear, from the prison of secrets I'd built around myself. Yes, I'd owned the company. Yes, I'd had the power to destroy her. Yes, I'd proven I wasn't nothing. But none of that mattered as much as what I'd learned in the process. That real strength isn't about never being vulnerable. It's about being vulnerable and surviving anyway. It's about being knocked down and choosing how to get back up. The girl who'd had nothing became the woman who owned everything. But more importantly, she became the woman who understood that everything means nothing without people to share it with. I'd spent years trying to protect myself by hiding my worth. In the end, I found safety by revealing it, by trusting the right people, by choosing connection over control. Patricia had called me nothing. She'd been wrong. But I'd almost become nothing by hiding who I truly was. She'd accidentally saved me from that fate by forcing me into the light. We were both flawed women who'd hurt each other. We'd both healed in our own ways, in our own time. And we'd both learned that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing differently in the future. The wine had washed away my secrets, my pride, my illusion of control. What remained was the truth. I was enough. I'd always been enough, and my daughter would grow up knowing the same thing. That was the real victory. Not the company, not the money, not the power, just the simple, profound truth that I was worthy of love exactly as I was, imperfect, scarred, but still standing, still here, still fighting, still growing. And in the end, that was everything.